All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving headfirst into the intricate world of the Korean language.
That's right.
We're talking history, culture, grammar, the whole shebang.
The whole 9 yards. We're going to unpack all the fascinating details about this land.
Exactly. And you know what? It seems like Korean is having a real moment right now.
Oh, absolutely.
K-pop, K-dramas, it's everywhere you turn.
It's true. Korean culture is really having its time in the global spotlight, for sure. But you know what's really cool? The language itself has a history that goes way beyond these recent trends.
That's what I love about doing these deep dives, going beyond the surface level.
Right.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty, can you give us some context? Like, how many people worldwide are we talking about who actually speak Korean? Paint us a picture here.
Oh, you ready for this? We are talking about a massive 81 million speakers globally. That's huge.
81 million. Wow. That's a whole lot of people. And it's Korean as in, well, from Korea, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But it actually goes back to Goryeo, which was a really important dynasty in Korean history.
Goryeo.
Yeah, Goryeo. It was the first dynasty that a lot of Westerners had contact with, so that name kind of stuck around.
I love that. It's amazing how these historical footprints end up shaping how we see the world. And speaking of history, from what our listener sent in, we're talking Old Korean, Middle Korean, even some hints of Manchurian influences.
Yeah.
It's like this whole linguistic tapestry.
It absolutely is. It's like looking at layers upon layers of history, and all of that history is still alive in the language we hear today.
Okay, now that is fascinating. So we're not just talking about like words changing over time, but something deeper, more structural.
Exactly. The language's history is woven into its very DNA. And one of the most amazing examples of that, how Korean reflects social hierarchy.
Ooh, now you're speaking my language. The intersection of language and culture, always a winner. And I'm seeing a lot in these notes about something called honorifics in Korean. Is that what you're talking about?
You know it. Honorifics are a really big deal in Korean. It means that the way you speak, even down to the verb endings you use, can completely change depending on who you're talking to.
Wait, hold on. So the verb ending itself changes based on how much respect you're showing.
Exactly.
Wow, English could never.
It's a whole other level. It's not just about being polite. It's about social harmony, respecting your elders, and understanding your place within a certain structure. And all of that is baked into the language itself.
Wow. So it's like grammar lessons are also etiquette lessons in Korean.
You could say that.
That's wild. So are these honorifics still a big deal in modern Korean, or are things changing as the culture evolves?
You know, it's a really interesting question because on one hand, yes, honorifics are absolutely still a core part of the language. But at the same time, you see younger generations kind of navigating them in new ways.
Yeah.
There's this growing awareness of how these really old traditions fit into, well, a society that's changing really fast.
So it's like this linguistic balancing act.
Exactly. And it's fascinating to watch it unfold.
It really is. Okay, so we've got these deep historical roots, a grammar system that's practically a social roadmap. What else makes Korean stand out in the world of languages? Because I feel like we've only just dipped our toes in the water here.
You are right about that. We haven't even gotten to the Korean alphabet, Hangul, yet.
Hangul. Okay, now there's a word I've definitely heard before. Even if I don't know much about it, it's the writing system, right?
That's right.
I've always thought it was so visually different from our alphabet.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But what's even more remarkable is its origin story. Because, you know, a lot of writing systems, they just kind of evolve over time, right?
Yeah, organically.
Hangul.
Someone literally sat down and created it. On purpose.
Wait, what? You're telling me somebody just decided to invent an alphabet from scratch?
Pretty much.
Get out of here. Who does that?
A king, that's who. King Sejong the Great. Back in the 15th century, he looked at the writing system they were using, which was mostly based on Chinese characters, and decided it just wasn't working. So he was like, nope, we're going to need a whole new system. What was wrong with the old one?
Well, it was super complicated. And King Sejong, he was a forward-thinking guy. He wanted everyone to be able to read and write. But the old system, with the Chinese characters, it was a huge barrier for a lot of people, especially ordinary folks.
He wanted something more accessible.
Exactly. He wanted a writing system that was truly Korean and easy to learn. And you know what? He nailed it.
King Sejong. Literacy hero. So how does Hangul actually work? What makes it so revolutionary?
Okay, so imagine this. If Chinese characters are like these intricate paintings, each one representing a whole word or idea, right?
Yeah.
Hangul is like building with blocks.
Oh, I like where this is going. Tell me more about these building blocks.
So you've got 24 basic letters called jamo, and you can combine them in different ways to create syllables, which then form words. It's incredibly logical, almost scientific.
So instead of memorizing thousands and thousands of characters, you learn these building blocks and how to fit them together.
You got it.
Mm.
That was the goal, to make it easier for people to learn. And it worked. Literacy rates in Korea skyrocketed after Hangul was introduced.
That's incredible. What a story. Talk about making a lasting impact. But we've got to address the elephant in the room here, right? Because we've got this awesome new alphabet, but then we still have Chinese characters hanging around in Korean vocabulary.
Oh yeah, we can't ignore that. It's this fascinating linguistic balancing act.
It really is. So how does that actually play out in modern Korean? So how does this whole Chinese character thing actually work in Korean? Like, do people just use them all the time?
It's not quite that straightforward. It's more like there are these two streams of vocabulary flowing together in Korean.
Yeah.
You've got native Korean words, the ones that have been there from the get-go, and then you've got words with Chinese origins, those Sino-Korean words.
Two streams, huh? That's a cool way to think about it. So, like, what kind of words are we talking about here? How can you tell them apart?
Well, a lot of times those Sino-Korean words, they pop up when you're talking about abstract ideas or in more formal situations, like, think academic jargon or technical term.
Okay, so like big, important sounding words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
While the everyday stuff, the words you'd use to talk about your family or food or just hanging out, those tend to come from the native Korean side.
That makes sense. It's like in English, we might say water normally, but then a scientist might talk about H2O. Same thing, but it hits different,
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. And the funny thing is, even linguists sometimes debate about how much of the Korean vocabulary actually comes from Chinese. It's not always a clean split.
Wow, so it's like this ongoing linguistic mystery. It really shows you how much languages can change and adapt over time.
Absolutely. It's a never-ending process.
Which kind of makes me think about how languages split sometimes. Which brings us to, well, the elephant in the room, or the DMZ in the peninsula, I guess you could say, North Korea and South Korea. Our listener sent in a ton of stuff on how their decades of separation have affected the Korean language. So, spill it. How different are they?
Oh man, this is where it gets really interesting. Because you're basically looking at this linguistic experiment in slow motion.
Mm-hmm.
Both North and South Korea, they start from the same linguistic roots, right?
Right.
But then, boom, 70 years of separation. And things get really interesting because we're not just talking about like different accents here.
Oh, more than that.
Oh yeah, we're talking shifts in pronunciation, vocabulary, even some grammar quirks.
But like, even though they started from the same place, they've kind of gone off on their own paths. Linguistically speaking, I mean.
Exactly. And it's fascinating to see how those paths have diverged. Like, think about pronunciation. You'd be amazed how many words, even spelled the same way, sound totally different depending on whether you're in Pyongyang or Seoul.
No way. Really?
Yeah. Like, take the word for labor. In the north, it's pronounced rodong, but in the south, it's nodong.
Rodong versus nodong. Wow. Even just hearing you say them, they sound so different. It's wild how one sound can change the whole vibe.
Right. It's incredible.
Are there other examples like that? Where the Sam word has these two totally distinct pronunciations?
Tons. Another good one is independence. North Korea, they say dongnip. South Korea, it's tongnip.
Kongnip? Kongnip. It's like linguistic twins separated at birth,
Yeah.
Like they've got the same DNA, but they've grown up so differently. But what about the words themselves? Are there any words that just exist in one version of Korean because of all the cultural and political differences?
Oh, absolutely. That's where things get really interesting because you can really see the ideologies reflected in the language. Like North Korea, they're all about self-reliance, this strong socialist worldview, and their language reflects that. They'll often use native Korean words instead of those Sino-Korean ones we talked about earlier. And they've even come up with their own unique terms for things. Like instead of saying friend, which in South Korea is 친구, they'll often say dongmu.
Dongmu. I've never heard that. It sounds, I don't know, stronger somehow.
Exactly. It's got this connotation of like solidarity, shared purpose. It's not just a casual friendship. It's deeper than that.
Wow, I love that. It's like every word becomes this little window into a whole other way of seeing things. But it also makes you wonder, with all these differences, pronunciation, vocabulary, even some grammar, can North and South Koreans still understand each other? Or have their languages drifted so far apart that they're practically speaking different languages?
It's the million-dollar question. And honestly, Linguists are still trying to figure it out. There's no easy answer. Yeah, it's complicated. Because on the one hand, yeah, there are some big differences. But the core grammar, the huge chunk of the vocabulary, still mutually intelligible. It's like you might need to ask someone to repeat themselves sometimes or really think about what a word means. But you can still get the gist.
That's so interesting. So more like different dialects of the same language, even if they can be tricky sometimes.
Exactly.
Man, we have covered so much ground. The history, the grammar, those Chinese characters, the North-South divide. It's a lot to process.
But we're not even done yet.
I believe it. But I gotta say, for someone just dipping their toes into the world of Korean, it could feel kind of overwhelming. What would you say to someone who's maybe feeling a little intimidated by all this?
It's true. It's a lot to take in all at once, but hey, learning any new language, it's always a journey, right?
It's the spirit.
There are going to be those moments where you're just like, what am I doing? This is impossible.
Oh yeah, those moments happen, but that's part of the fun.
Exactly. And with Korean, I feel like it gets this reputation.
Oh, totally. Like people hear Korean and they're like, oh no, that's like impossible, you know?
It's that Defense Language Institute ranking, I bet.
Yeah, they have that whole ranking system, right? And they put Korean as one of the hardest languages for English speakers. Like way up there with Arabic and Chinese.
And those are no joke. But.
Right.
But. Remember Hangul?
Oh, yeah. The awesome alphabet. I almost forgot about that. We got so caught up in the history and all the cultural stuff.
Right. But that's the thing. King Sejong, he was like, we're going to make this easy.
Literacy hero.
He designed Hangul to be logical, to be accessible. It's not about memorizing thousands of characters. It's way more streamlined than that.
So, yes, learning any new language is going to have its challenges for sure. But Korean is actually set up to be pretty learner-friendly, at least at the beginning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've got this awesome tool right from the start.
Okay, you've convinced me. Learning Hangul is officially going on the bucket list.
I love it.
It's like cracking a code. And who knows, maybe I'll finally be able to watch those K-dramas without subtitles.
Now you're talking. And it's not just about understanding the words, right? It's about like unlocking this whole other level of the culture. Remember how we talked about how much meaning is packed into the language itself?
Well, yeah, the history, the social cues, all of it.
Learning Korean's like getting a backstage pass to all of it.
That's what I love about languages. It's like this whole new way of seeing things opens up.
100%.
Amazing. So to our listener out there who just took this deep dive with us into the world of Korean, we hope you're feeling inspired. Don't be intimidated. Embrace the challenge.
It's so worth it.
And hey, if you want to learn more, we've got tons of resources linked in the show notes, websites, apps, you name it. We've even thrown in some of our favorite Korean movies and music to get you started.
It's true. We went all out.
Because we love a good deep dive here. This is just the beginning.
The surface has barely been scratched.
Until next time, everyone, happy diving.